All right, it's week 2. You've been reading and you've been finding articles and you've been thinking about what you want to write about. Nobody, to the best of my knowledge, has died from a collapsing archway, which means we're ready for the next step. Congratulations. Welcome to week 2 of Capstone. So I don't even want to tell you how long it took me to figure out how to code this next aspect that's on the website. What I've done is I've put together a set of considerations, if you want to call them that. Obviously, you want to get detailed about your capstone, but at first I think it's good to sort of think big picture. And although the capstones will look a little bit different depending on who you are, what you're trying to study, what methodology, there's a general sense of what a capstone should look like. And so I want you to think about that general sense and then how you fit in. And so you can play with this dial, a bunch of dials, which I don't know why, but Eddie, I guess, my dog, my Chihuahua, has now become the mascot of this class. And so I made little Eddie sliders. And again, I don't want to divulge how long that has taken me to figure out the HTML and CSS and the code for that. But anyway, now you can check to see how long it should take you and how long you should be preparing, or at what date you should be preparing to make sure that everything is done on time, depending on your specific situation. And this is important because very few, if any, people have failed capstone for any other reason than they haven't been doing the work. So if you've made it to your graduating year, you completely have the skills necessary to get a degree in communication studies. Hopefully, and I know you do, but hopefully you're able to plan accordingly. Because like I said, the only people really that I've seen fail are people who put it off for a week and then say, well, next week I'll do double the work. And then the week after that, they haven't done anything, but they're like, well, I'll do triple the work this week. And then eventually, you have a week left and it's impossible to do a capstone. And so this exercise this week will help you, and you can redo it. You can redo it as many times as you want. So if you realize later that you were originally going to do human research and therefore you needed IRB approval, but now you're going to switch to content only and you don't need IRB approval, you can slide the slider all the way to the left, which means that you have 0 days to work on your IRB, if that's the case. If you are doing research that affects people or that may affect people, then you need to do IRB, and then you need to give that probably about 2 weeks at least to get approval for that, depending on sort of the severity of it. I assume you're not going to shock people and stuff like that, so fly going on here. So yeah, it shouldn't take too long. Usually communication studies is pretty quick, but any human stuff needs to go through IRB. So let me just break down these different steps, and that's all you need to do is think about big picture and where you might fit in. If you don't have all the answers, it's totally okay. It's only the second week. All you should really be doing right now is reading. And as you read, you'll see the way the different articles or maybe even monographs, if you're picking up dissertations or master's theses, that's also a good idea. You don't have to do that, obviously. You don't have to do it as big as that, but the way that they're broken down might help you break down yours into manageable parts. So let's look at it. So again, on the website, you have the lit review. So the lit review should probably take you a few weeks minimum, and that involves reading and then synthesizing, I wish I could speak better, the information that you found. And as I was telling one student the other day, it doesn't have to be all good information. So sometimes you read an article and you think, this is stupid as hell. That's actually maybe a good thing. Assuming that you're reading a peer-reviewed journal article and you really don't like it, you can say, I'm going to be working in a way that is almost in complete contrast to this article because I think this author made a really dumb mistake and here's why. And so I'm going to do the opposite. And that's a totally good thing to include in your content analysis, in your lit review as well. Maybe you'll do a content analysis. Maybe you'll do surveys. Maybe you'll do sort of ideological analysis or textual analysis. And there's all these analyses that you can do. And we'll talk about that. But first, just read a bunch of stuff that's related to what you're doing, or what's related to what you're interested in, and then put together the themes of that. So, my dissertation, my PhD was on gangs. I had to read a lot about gangs, obviously. I also read a lot about journalism and journalism ethics. I read a lot about race and critical race and gender. And so those are different fields sometimes they come together. They obviously intersect in different ways, but I kind of divided what I did into here's the sort of criminology aspect, here's what critical race scholars have been saying, here's what gender studies and women's studies people have been saying, and here's how it fits together, and here are some studies that are like the one I want to do or that have inspired the one I want to do. So seems like a lot, but you give yourself, let's say, a month to do that, totally doable. Next, you want to think about the method you're going to use. And some methods are very complex, but I highly recommend choosing a relatively simple method. So maybe it's collecting newspaper articles from a certain time with certain parameters, or maybe it's interviewing certain people and asking these specific questions and collecting that in a specific way. But that should come easily after doing everything comes easily after doing the lit review, because you can say, these articles use this methodology and I'm going to use something similar. And that's all you have to do. So a method, writing the method section should probably not take you very long, a week tops, if you have all that background research. After that, you need to possibly, if you're doing human research, like I said, think about your IRB and apply for an IRB approval. That can take God knows how long, but I would give it at least 2 weeks. In the meantime, you can continue to read and you can continue to maybe collect data if it's not the human involvement stuff, like maybe you have different aspects. But anyway, that can take some time, so you have to plan accordingly. Next, what's on my list? Data collection. That depends. So data collection can mean a number of different things. Let's say you're doing film analyses and you're looking at films from Hollywood over the last 20 years, and you have 20 films, one top film per year that you're going to watch and that you're going to code. And maybe the average film takes 2 hours, right? So already you're dealing with 40 hours if you're going 20 years back. That you want to think about. So how long will it take you to collect data? And maybe you're going to have to keep pausing the film. So maybe actually each film takes you 5 hours instead of 2. You have to account for that. That could be, that could sometimes be serious time. Otherwise, maybe you put a survey out there and you just wait for people to reply to it, and you're going to put it out there for a set period of time, 1 month or something like that. And obviously it's going to take you 1 month simply to collect your data. After you collect your data, then you have findings. So then you just say what you found. So if you're doing a content analysis, you say, usually with numbers, this is how many times this happened, this is how many times this happened, and here's what I was expecting, and here's what we found. If you're doing survey results, similar thing. You want to say, here's what people were saying. Maybe you're thematically reading it. So you're saying, I interviewed 50 people and the themes that I found were A, B, and C. And so that's what it means to write up your findings. And then your next section, which is typically your last because we won't count conclusion, we'll lump conclusion into this, but it's your discussion section. So if you're doing a theoretical, critical, ideological analysis, then your discussion section is probably half your paper. If you're doing a more scientific, like traditionally scientific approach, your discussion is probably going to be a lot shorter. And so that depends on you. Maybe it will take you 2 weeks, maybe it'll take you 3 weeks, maybe it'll take you longer, or maybe it will take you less. And so that's something to consider. And then once you have all that done, you can produce a final draft. Obviously, you should be, in the meantime, we'll be talking and we'll be discussing how to make improvements or deal with whatever possible setbacks or challenges you might have. So we can account for that in how we plan our time. But once you've done your lit review and figured out everything, which will probably, I think, take you the longest, I would encourage you to spend a lot of time on the lit review, because what you don't want to do is say, I have a feeling that gender is related to representation in music videos, and act as if you were the first person to ever think of that, when really you should have been reading about that, because there's lots of stuff written about that. So you don't want to come up with something that so many people have already come up with, and you don't seem to acknowledge that. So that's why the lit review is super important. Also, you don't want to plagiarize, but you can totally just take somebody's method and say, this is how they did it, and you cite, obviously, but then you just say, I'm going to do the same thing, and you specify the details. So the more lit review you do, the easier everything else becomes. Because then you can also say my findings were similar to or different from these other people. So once you have all that, you do a final draft. Once you do your final draft, give me at least a week, depending on how many people are in the class. But if it's a small class, I can get back all the papers in a week. If it's a big class, then it changes, obviously. But you send me a draft, I send you back comments, we go back and forth a little bit, and that's the final process. And then you just present your stuff, and then you celebrate. I made sure to put a thing at the bottom of this online form where you plan your celebration, because that's the last step of this whole thing. Don't forget to celebrate when you're done. Anyway, it seems like this huge thing, and it is, by certain standards, but you take a week-by-week approach. You use this slider thing that I've made, which should hopefully make things easier to calculate. I mean, it automatically calculates for you. And if you need to adjust, if it's taking longer, or if you were just, I don't know, super excited and you got your lit review done in a week, then you can change accordingly. But if you plan like this, I know all of you have the skills and the intelligence to graduate and to do excellent capstone projects. All you got to do is just plan. So use this, plan, send it to me, and we can talk. If you think you're going to do an IRB and get approval in a day or two, then we'll have to have a discussion. But usually what I just want to see is that you're planning accordingly, right? You've given a few weeks to your lit review. You've given adequate time to your collection of data. Like, you're not going to plan to watch 20 movies in one day, because obviously you physically can't do that, right? You're going to do great. Congratulations on making it to week 2 of Capstone, and I look forward to seeing what you have planned and what you have in store for us and to share with the world. Also, last little tiny bit, I have put a Ask Me Anything button on my website, which is designed to allow you to ask things that you might feel as if it was a dumb question. So if you're, kind of nervous about asking something because you think it'll make you look bad, it's an anonymous question gatherer, which means if you want to say, I really don't even understand what a methodology is, I passed methodology somehow, and I'm just stuck writing the beginning, here's what I have, you can send that to me. And I guess I might know who you are if you give me the method and then you send it again. But anyway, you can ask little questions or you can ask big questions. If you don't want to come out and say who you are, that's totally fine. You can ask a question there. It's designed to help you and to take away any of the challenges of, saying that you don't know something, which is totally appropriate. You shouldn't know everything. If you did, I wouldn't have a job. And I obviously don't know everything. I won't even get into all the things I don't know. But you'll know a lot more after this whole project. So please plan accordingly, and you will do wonderful things. Look forward to speaking with you soon. Cheers.